What's up, y'all? So welcome back. Today we are still talking about nutritional vitality. We're talking about our second concept within nutritional vitality, and that is minimizing toxicity. So in today's video, we're going to talk about what are toxins, what do they do inside the body, what are the main sources of toxins, which gives us our definition of the foods that we want to avoid. And then we have a list of ingredients that we can use to read labels. We're always updating that. And then also we'll talk about choosing foods made with the right ingredients. So first, what are toxins? More specifically, we call them toxicants, but what are toxicants or toxins? Toxins by definition have been deemed to damage cells, tissues, organs, and systems. That damage, by the way, has to be repaired, and that repair process requires nutrients. All right, so the damage and the repair is nutrient depleting. And then also that damage inhibits the assimilation and usage of nutrients. And then we also end up depleting nutrients because we have to bind those toxins to a nutrient through the detox pathways to excrete those toxins out of the body. So in general, toxins damage and they are nutrient depleting. Now we have internal toxins that we call endogenous toxins, like cellular waste and undigested food, and we have all kinds of living organisms inside us that produce their own waste. And then we also have things like stress, which contribute to toxicity because high levels of specific hormones the body has to break down and deconjugate. And then we also have things that might be somewhat unavoidable, like external toxins like pollution, EMFs and radiation, things that we might be putting on our skin through skincare. And then pharmaceuticals, by definition, are liver toxic. And some of us, have to do what we have to do. And maybe part of our goal of eating real food and living a healthier life is trying to wean ourselves off of certain pharmaceuticals. But pharmaceuticals are also in the water supply, they're in the rainwater, we're exposed to them anywhere and everywhere, even if you're not taking them. And then we have things like water that can be toxic, right? If you don't have extremely clean water, which is why we recommend people get reverse osmosis, carbon filtrated water or better, then you're definitely being exposed to some toxins. And then some of us have some indulgences, like coffee most days, it has some caffeine in it. Caffeine is a toxin. It's relatively easy to excrete, but it's still a toxin. And then some of us like to have a drink here and there. But let's talk about real food sources of toxins. Real food sources of toxins mainly come from GMOs and processed food. And within the processed food realm, the main sources of toxins are going to be refined cereal grains, industrial seed oils, high amounts of sugar from the wrong sources, and then processed soy. And then, of course, we always have the potential to have pesticides and heavy metals and industrial pollutants, and then chemicals and preservatives and dyes. All right, so if we look at our foods to avoid, this list of foods to avoid is based on toxicity and avoiding toxicity or minimizing toxicity. The first little category on our foods to avoid is avoiding excess sugar. We're not anti-sugar, we're not low carbers. We just want to be strategic with our carbohydrates and make sure that they come from the right sources. All right, so when you're reading labels, it's useful to understand that most people don't know what the heck a gram looks like, right? But they know what a teaspoon looks like. So if I'm looking at a label of a food product and it has a certain amount of sugar, I can divide that number of grams by 4, and that will give me a volume of a teaspoon. And so then I have an idea of what that looks like from a volume perspective. And just using some common sense here without even giving you any rules, consuming something that has 4 grams of sugar in it or a teaspoon versus something that has 20 grams of sugar in it, which is 5 teaspoons. I mean, a little common sense. We just automatically, when you start to have this awareness through reading labels, you start to make better decisions. You start to have less of these things that are considered problematic. So we're not really given any rules. We'd say maybe about 25-30 grams of sugar in a day is the max you'd want to consume, but really just having a conscious participation in this process by reading labels. And always avoiding toxic sources of sugar like high fructose corn syrup. The second category here is avoiding artificial sweeteners. So artificial sweeteners are really popular in the low carb realm, which they can be useful to minimize the impact of carbohydrates on the body, but they're also extremely toxic. So we'd say that we need to avoid all of these artificial sweeteners because of the damage and the nutrient depletion. And then refined and processed foods, by definition, are going to have a group of ingredients clustered together that we are trying to avoid in the first place. So processed food in general is something that we're always going to avoid. And then we want to avoid most grain-like seeds. Seeds in general are very difficult for human beings to digest because seeds are a plant's next offspring. And so a plant protects those seeds by building anti-nutrients into the seed, protection mechanism. And all seeds have a different profile. One of the most famous is going to be, or infamous, is going to be gluten associated with wheat. Gluten is a prolamine, if I'm not mistaken, and it's an anti-nutrient found in wheat that causes a lot of problems for a lot of people, noticeable problems. But everyone reacts to gluten at a very low level. And so we want to definitely avoid the gluten-containing grains such as wheat, spelt, rye, and barley. And then all other seeds and grains need to be suspect. And we'd say most humans probably do better without consuming those things on a regular basis. We definitely want to avoid our toxic fats and oils. So anything that's hydrogenated, partially hydrogenated, like margarine or Crisco. A lot of the times you'll see some of these creamers like International Delights and Coffee Mate use hydrogenated soybean oil. All right, so hydrogenated is a process that makes these things completely toxic, makes them solid. The body takes up these fats and thinks that there's something that's usable, and it ends up displacing the body's ability to use the right kind of fats. And then also these fats contribute to all kinds of different inflammation and also insulin resistance. So avoiding hydrogenated, partially hydrogenated margarine, Crisco, all the fake butters and spreads, like I Can't Believe It's Not Butter and Earth Balance and Country Crock. And then also the highly processed and industrial oils. So things like canola and corn and soybean and vegetable and grapeseed and safflower and rice bran oil. Sunflower oil needs to be avoided unless it's high stearic or high oleic, because then it's been converted into a dominant monounsaturated fat, which makes it just a little bit more stable. These toxic fats, by the way, are probably the most insidious ingredient that's out there, and we have to be more cautious about these than anything else in these foods to avoid. Because again, they sneak into everything in processed food. They sneak into foods in restaurants, and you're not going to notice much when you consume them immediately, but the problem is that the body takes these fats up, and then it displaces your body's ability to assimilate the right kind of fats that it actually needs, and it causes all kinds of damage inside the body, so extremely toxic. And then we want to avoid low quality dairy. So we love full fat dairy, we love the nutritional value in dairy, we love the metabolic efficiency that comes with dairy, but we want the real deal. We don't want modified dairy. We don't want low fat, fat-free, or manipulated dairy where ingredients and vitamins and minerals have been added back to it because they're usually in forms the body doesn't understand and can't use. And then finally, we want to make sure that we're avoiding genetically modified ingredients. All right, so we're always avoiding canola, even if it's listed as non-GMO, because it's just a toxic fat in general. We're almost always going to avoid soy unless we see something like soy lecithin as an emulsifier, which we think is perfectly fine in small amounts. And then we want to avoid sugar beets. Now, the only way you're going to notice something is made with sugar beets is if it has an ingredient labeled as sugar and it doesn't specifically say cane sugar or another specific sugar. So anything that just says sugar is almost guaranteed GMO sugar beets. And then we always avoid alfalfa and high fructose corn syrup. And then if we're going to consume corn, papaya, summer squash, or zucchini, we want to make sure we get the organic or non-GMO versions of those, because if we get the conventional version, guaranteed they're going to be genetically modified. Now, if you're not familiar with what's problematic about GMOs, we'll have that as a resource in the post associated with this video. We've done our best to come up with a list of acceptable ingredients, suspect ingredients, and ingredients that we want to absolutely avoid. And this list is always updating, so depending on when you watch this video, the best place to get this resource of information is going to be at our community website at community.superhumantransformation.com. But just as an idea, we do have a list of things that are acceptable, that are possibly tolerable, but you have to pay attention because maybe you'll experience some digestive issues from it, and so, some things that we're just not sure about, and then some things that we absolutely know that we want to avoid. All right, so we definitely avoid, again, the GMOs, the grains, the artificial sweeteners, and the toxic fats and oils. And if you have any questions about that, just let us know. All right. Other things to consider: if you ever see anything that says reduced fat or low calorie or sugar-free or light, that usually means modified or manipulated. And when we eat real food, or if we eat things that are made with the right ingredients, we want things as close to nature as possible. Anytime you see nutrition claims on the front of a package, you have to understand that's marketing. All right, so if you see a 3-ingredient list on the front of a package like Himalayan salt, olive oil, and popcorn or something like that, you may think that that's the only ingredients in that food product, but you want to turn that around and look at the full list of ingredients, because a lot of times they only list the things on the front that people want to see. Also, a lot of times because of labeling laws, if you see something that says made with 100% real beef or made with 100% juice, that only means that one ingredient is 100% beef or one ingredient is 100% juice. That means there could be other ingredients. So again, we want to read the ingredients. That's how olive oil, a lot of olive oils out there are tainted because it says 100% olive oil, but that means that that's just one ingredient. And if you dive into it, sometimes you'll see there's other ingredients in olive oils. All right, and then we have our sugar rule, and then again, we always want to avoid wheat, corn, and soy to the best of our abilities. So now that we understand the impact of toxins, damage to the body, depleting of nutrients, we want to minimize toxins. One of the first steps that we want to do when we become a real foodie or move into this SHT way of eating is we want to start to choose things made with the right ingredients. So a lot of times we feel like when we come into this real food way of eating, we're going to be giving up a lot of things that we really enjoy. And the reality is we just want to make sure that we're choosing things made with the right ingredients. So there's usually alternatives to just about everything. If I want a potato chip, in theory, potato chips should be fine because they're safe starch, a potato. The problem is that they're usually loaded with other ingredients and cooked in crappy oils. And so we just want to make sure that we get potato chips that are made with the right ingredients. So there's plenty of potato chips that are cooked in coconut oil or avocado oil. There's dipping chips. We love the SHT brand. They're cassava flour chips cooked in some avocado oil. There's plantain chips and banana chips. So there's alternatives out there. We just need to choose the right ones made with the right ingredients. And the same thing goes for desserts. You know, there's dark chocolate peanut butter cup bars and almond butter cup bars and ice creams made with the right ingredients. And so there's a lot of different options out there that we can turn to. There's even gluten-free pizzas that check out. By the way, just because it's gluten-free pizza doesn't mean that it completely checks out automatically. We want to read the list of ingredients or get the ingredients from the place that we're buying the pizza from. Because a lot of times gluten-free also means that they're incorporating things like canola oil or some other crappy oil. All right, and then we have alternatives for things like tortillas. We have some homemade tortilla recipes. There's some store-bought tortillas that are approved and check out. And so part of what we're doing as being a real foodie is moving away from the standard American diet that is loaded with toxins, has horrible nutritional value, and we're moving towards things that are made with the right ingredients. That's going to be less toxic. It might not be optimal from a nutrient standpoint, but it's better than eating those toxic versions of those things, right? So some minimizing toxicity key points. Remember, toxins damage the body and they deplete nutrients. All right, so we always want to choose foods made with the right ingredients. That's our first rung in the ladder. That's our minimum step. We always, if I'm going to have something that's indulgent, it needs to be made with the right ingredients. We want to consider improving food quality whenever possible. And that means that upgrading to something with a little bit better quality is going to have more nutrients and it's going to have less toxicity. And then we want to reduce our exposure to exogenous toxins. So things in our environment that we can control to the best of our abilities. And there's a lot of research that we can do to figure out what those things are and how to do that. All right. And again, if you haven't done so already, make sure you join our community over at community.superhumantransformation.com. And we will see you guys in the next video.